Oh, yeah, I can use that.
Right. Okay, so our second speaker is Faidra Monachou, and she's speaking on why the Rooney Rule fumbles, limitations of interview stage diversity interventions in labor markets.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm excited to present our work on limitations of interview stage diversity interventions in the labor market. This is joint work with Setareh, Farajollahzadeh, Soonbong, and Vahideh Manshadi. So our work is motivated by the Rooney Rule. Rooney Rule is this policy introduced by Dan Rooney in 2003 in an attempt to increase diversity in the NFL, so increase the representation of Black coaches in the NFL back then. You can think of Rooney Rule as a soft affirmative action policy. So it's this idea that we can impose a constraint at the interview stage rather than the final hiring outcome. And this idea has since been adopted across several industries in North America. For example, lawyers have the Mansfield rule, but really more than half of top 500 companies have a similar policy in place. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years or more that the Rooney Rule has been around, we have seen little to no success in increasing diversity. So there's a lot of empirical evidence from NFL, from the law industry as well, that yes, certain minorities are interviewed more under the Rooney Rule, but still hire at a much lower rate than the target representation level. So motivated by this, in this paper, we take an applied modeling approach to ask why do interview stage diversity policies like the Rooney Rule struggle to achieve, to improve representation? Oops, that was bad. Okay, well, I'll continue here. So struggle to improve representation in hiring outcomes. And to answer this question, we developed a labor market model with three characteristics. So basically, we introduce a hiring stage of interviews. So it's a two-stage hiring model. We also adopt racial discrimination. Here you go. Yeah. Okay. So we also adopt a statistical discrimination approach, meaning that groups are post-interview identical, but interview invitations rely on non-identical signals. And finally, we introduce competition across firms. So with that, we have three high-level takeaways. So first of all, we show that there is a new mechanism that we call filtering bias that arises because of the limited interview capacity that firms have. And this leads to hiring disparities even when both groups are post-interview identical. The second one is that unfortunately, Rooney Rule doesn't eliminate hiring disparities unless the firm dramatically overrepresent the disadvantaged group in the interview stage, way beyond the target equal representation level. And the last one is about competition. So in a model with two firms where only the top firm adopts the Rooney Rule, but the less preferred firm doesn't, we show that the Rooney Rule can decrease diversity at the less preferred firm, but also across the total market. So in a sense, we are harming the group we were intending to help. And there's a lot of literature on this problem that I'll skip in the interest of time. So let me go straight into the model. So we have, thank you. So we have a continuum model of two groups. So there are two groups of equal mass, M and W, and they apply to this firm. This is for a single firm now. And the firm sees what we call the pre-interview score, which is drawn from some normal distribution, potentially with different variances across the groups. But the firm actually does not care about that. They care about what we call the match value. So this is coming from another normal distribution conditional on this pre-interview scores. But the problem is that it is revealed only post-interview. So schematically, this is what happens here. So we have the two groups. These are M and W. They come with their pre-interview scores that they differ across groups. And then some subset, subject to some interview capacity C, is selected to go to the interview stage. So let's say we have a candidate with pre-score A that goes to the interviews, and then their performance is drawn from another normal distribution that again might depend on the group they belong to, that gives the match value that the firm cares about. So then the firm collects all these match values, and then they simply select the best to fill their hiring capacity. Okay, so that's the model. And as you see in every stage of the model, we have different distribution across groups. So what we assume, though, and the main assumption of the model is that these two groups are post-interview identical. Okay, so we assume that basically if we had infinite interview capacity, okay, like here, we could interview everyone, then we wouldn't have any disparities. Like in an ideal world where everybody could have an interview, we would select at equal rates. But there is limited interview capacity, and we also assume that there is asymmetric information. So at the pre-interview stage, we assume that group M has an informational advantage. This means that there are more group M candidates, the blue group, with higher scores. But to be consistent with part A, with the assumption of post-interview symmetry, we also give an informational advantage at the interview stage to the other group. So this is the red group, group W. So it is not clear when one group has an informational advantage in the pre-interview stage and the other group has an informational advantage at the interview stage, who gets interviewed more and who gets hired more. So this is what we will answer now for one firm. And before I give you the answer, let me just formalize things a little bit. So this is the optimization problem of the firm. This is the objective that I told you, the match value of hiring candidates. And we have two constraints, which is the interview capacity and the hiring capacity constraint. And we are selecting, basically we have three decision variables. So we have the interview sets for each group, and we also have hiring threshold for the second stage. So this might look like an innocent optimization problem. It is not, because there is some heterogeneity coming from the fact that the interview sets depend on the future hiring threshold that I'm going to set as a firm. So skipping all the technical details, this leads to a non-trivial fixed point equation that we had to solve. But the optimal solution, at least for one firm, is intuitively. It has a greedy structure. So it says that there are two thresholds for interviews. I select everybody above that threshold to give an interview to. And then there is another threshold after the interviews for hiring. And how do we select the interviews? Basically, we have this notion of excess value function, which gives you some idea about why this problem is non-trivial. This captures how valuable a candidate's current potential is relative to the future hiring decisions we're going to make. So adding the Rooney rule as an intervention here simply means adding a constraint in this optimization problem. We require that the fraction row of the interviews goes to group W. And with that, here is our main, the first main result. So we show that Rooney rule has little to no effect in increasing diversity in hiring outcomes, but interestingly, the outcome depends on the interview capacity. So for smaller capacity, we see that there's a small positive effect. We increase diversity, but still group W will remain underrepresented in the hiring outcome, even if we overrepresented them in the interview stage. But when we go to medium levels of capacity, so we increase the interview capacity, then Rooney rule has no effect. The firm was already overrepresenting group W in the interview stage without achieving equal representation in the hiring stage. So what's the intuition for that? You can think of it as exploration/exploitation trade-off. So When we have small capacity, we want to exploit more. We want to go after the safe candidates from group M. But when we increase capacity, then we can afford more exploration, like going after the high risk, high reward candidates. But still, because capacity is not infinite, even if we equalize interview rates, this filtering bias that's coming from the informational advantage that group M had in the pre-interview stage still translates to disparities in the final match values of the interviewed people. Now for two firms, I'm going to extend the result onto two firms. So this is pretty straightforward modeling wise. We now assume that there are two firms and firm one is preferred by everybody compared to firm two. So in terms of strategies, nothing changes in the single firm case. So nothing changes in the firm one case. So it's the same as the single firm model, but things become technically interesting for firm two, because now firm two has to account for competition from firm one. So essentially they need to think about this availability function that comes up in the optimization problem, think whether somebody was hired by firm one already or were interviewed by not hired. So there's some uncertainty about who's available. This makes their strategy, interview and hiring strategy, non-greedy. So that's an interesting structure, also like from a theoretical perspective. Before we had just firm one, right? Like firm one used just a single threshold to interview people above that threshold. Now firm two is greedy only outside, like below that interview threshold of firm one, and it becomes non-greedy when they overlap, when they are competing with firm one. So we can see at a high level that firm two now avoids the borderline candidates and also the superstar candidates that were interviewed by firm one, even if they were not hired. And this, is aligned with some market patterns that we see in some data, and also, but it's in contrast with some other theoretical models. It's more general. I'm going to skip the details, but happy to talk about it more. So what does this mean for diversity now? Well, if we have this like two-firm model and we assume that firm one has Rooney rule, but firm two doesn't have Rooney rule, then what we find is that diversity is going to decrease in the firm that doesn't adopt the Rooney rule, which might not be that surprising. But diversity is going to decrease across the total market. So we now see like things becoming worse across both firms. So why is that? Well, I don't have time to go over the technical details, but Rooney rule has a counterintuitive effect at the individual level. So this is what's really driving things. This is a summary of some intuition. Basically, the superstar candidates, when Rooney rule is in place for the top firm, are going to gain. So that's good news for everyone. But for the borderline candidates, we see the disadvantaged candidates from group W actually lose in total. And the opposite happens for group M candidates, which was the advantage group. So I don't know how much time I have. I'm probably over time. So yeah, so I'll stop here. I will not read that slide, but I'm happy to answer any questions offline or not. Thank you.
I think we can do one quick question. A quick question for the audience.
Thanks for the great talk. Can you get a decrease in diversity if both firms have Rooney rule?
If both firms have Rooney rule, well, we're going to weakly increase diversity in some sense, but also because of the competition, like there's going to be like potentially more overlap, I'm assuming, between the interview sets. So I'm not sure, we haven't analyzed exactly this case, but I want to say in practice that typically, for example, like in the law industry, the top firms get this Mansfield certification, like the top law firms, while the less competitive firms do not. So like this is why we analyze like this case where only one firm, the top firm,
Thanks.
adopts that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to need to take any further questions offline, but let's thank the speaker again.